Week 1, Eagles-Cowboys. Devontae Smith has a receiving yards line of 54.5, and I think it should be 60.5, but I'm not going to bet it and suggest you don't either. I'm Alex Blickel, Director of Analytics at FTN Fantasy and host of my own Discord on the Tails Marketplace. I've made over 200 units since the start of last NFL season in props and pick'em, and today we're going to talk about why I think so many people find props to be a lot more difficult than they think that it should be. So let's talk about why that is. And it starts with this idea that almost all of us have heard at this point. Props are beatable because the books don't spend as much time setting those lines as they do in totals and spreads. Why? Because there's not as much liquidity in those markets. And you know what? That's true. But here's the key. Inefficient lines don't guarantee beatable props. The truth is the house has an advantage, whether we're referring to the house as these books or these pick'em sites like PrizePicks and Underdog. The house has an advantage not because they set efficient lines, but because they don't have to. This is probably the most important line you will hear me say in this short video, but it's profoundly true. Their advantage comes from the cut that they take. And on sportsbooks, we refer to this cut as the vig. On these pick'em sites, we refer to it as the rake. But today, let's just think of it as juice. We're going to refer to juice quite a bit here on this show. But when we're talking about sportsbooks, the juice is fairly obvious to see. It's presented to us through the odds. When you look at a pick, you see minus 110, minus 120. You see what the other side is too. If there was no juice, most picks would be plus 100 on either side. But that's usually not what we see. We see minus 110, minus 110. Minus 115, minus 115. What I want us to think about here today is instead of measuring the juice by the percentage that the house takes, let's think of juice instead as how much harder it is for us to be profitable in the long run. And we can think of this with the odds as the implied probability. For example, minus 120 has an implied probability of 54.55%. So if I spent a lifetime betting into minus 120, I would have to be right more than 54.55% of the time to be profitable. That's a much easier way of thinking about juice, and it then also carries over to the pick'em sites quite well. On the pick'em sites, it's a little bit more complicated, and the juice is hidden because we're not presented with it to our face the same way we are with minus 110, minus 120 with those odds on sportsbooks. And the amount of juice actually changes with the number of picks you include in your play. If we wanted to simply minimize the amount of juice we were playing into on the pick'em sites, on both PrizePicks and Underdog, we would go to the 6-pick flex play. Here we'd be playing into, or actually, let's use that implied probability definition of juice. We'd be looking at an implied probability of 53.8% on Underdog for a 6-pick flex play. However, it's obviously pretty hard to go 6 for 6. So if we're instead then going to try to balance our likelihood of winning with getting a lower amount of juice, we're not going to go to a 2-pick play because a 2-pick play has an implied probability of 58%. Instead, we're going to go to the 3-pick play, which has an implied probability of 55%. That's like taking the odds from minus 138 to minus 122 by going from a 2-pick to a 3-pick play. Now, you might be thinking, but that person that I tail plays a lot of 2-pick plays. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's a red flag, but it's at least a yellow flag and should make you think a little bit. You don't want to be playing into minus 138 when you can just as easily play into minus 122. Another really quick way of thinking about this is if you have a 2-pick play, you could literally build 2 3-pick plays and just flip a coin, and you're going to have the exact same rate of return on a 3-pick play because the payout is twice the amount, right? So if you take a 3x payout for a 2-pick play and then double it to 6x, literally all you're doing is saying, okay, my next pick, as long as it's better than a literal coin flip, I should be going to that 3-pick play. But let's not get hung up too much on that. In fact, that's going to be another show in and of itself, how to make sure you're doing the right pick sizes over on these pick'em games. But instead, let's bring this back to the idea of why the house has such an advantage. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go, instead of Underdog, let's go to the PrizePicks, the MLB PrizePicks tool over at FTN Fantasy. And what I want to show you is we have 76 hits plus runs plus RBI props available today. Here, this is Sunday, August 24th, as I'm recording this. And I'm going to grab some. You can see some of these top guys are 2.5. So I'm going to look instead at Brandon Lau, one of the highest projected players. He's at 2.21 projected hits plus run plus RBIs. His line is 1.5. So we think, okay, that's a great play, right? But actually, this win probability is only 52.2%. If we need a 55% play, this is obviously not good enough, even though it's one of the best projected. We can also flip this around and look at some of the lowest projected players, like Jacob Marcy here at 1.59, and this is only 45.4%. So if you're going to take the under, it'd be 54.6%. Again, not good enough. And like I said, there were 76 available props here, available hits plus run plus RBI props. We looked at one of the best projected players and one of the worst projected players, and neither of them are picks. Out of the 76, you could maybe make a case for 3 or 4 being worthwhile picks. That's not what most people expect to hear, and that's because it's that difficult to overcome the juice. The juice is just so strong that we need to find plays that are good enough. So when we look at something like a Devontae Smith, 54.5 receiving yards line, when we look at A.J. Brown, 66.5 receiving yards, the two kind of mistakes that I see people make all the time is they're presented with a line like this, and they say, okay, which is more likely to occur? Is Devontae Smith going to go over, or is he more likely to go under? And then they make their selection. Or they do what I kind of did at the start of the show. They say, it's 54.5, I think it's 60.5, and therefore I should take the higher. That's not how it goes. We need to find picks that are good enough, not just the more likely of the two options. And in fact, when you scroll through for any slate, MLB, NFL, what people need to understand is that you're almost universally being presented with a wrong choice and a more wrong choice, not a wrong choice and a right choice. Most of these are lose-lose, and we are trying to find those very select few on any given slate, on any given day, where the edge is actually in our favor, and we're overcoming the juice. Now, this is, again, not some hidden cheat code where it becomes automatic or guaranteed that we're going to win. But I promise you, if you simply keep this in mind and understand that most picks that you can make are bad, and you become very, very picky, you will immediately start to see results, and you're going to have success in the long run. But if you don't trust yourself to find those very few on each slate, that's what we've got you covered for, FTN Fantasy, or my Discord. All of my pick'em and props plays are given out in my Discord. You can find promo codes for both in the description below. Let's have an awesome NFL season.